it's Mike and Brad down here on the Strip. We're doing our 12th year of doing the Big Search. And the Big Search is something very close to my heart. When we came back from India, Denise and I and the family, having worked with human trafficking there, we were looking for somebody to learn from on how to engage here in the United States. And God had put Brad and I together. 10 years ago this week we met. And I don't think either of us are all that nostalgic, but I wanted to just take a moment, especially for everyone out there and free supporters, to give a little history of the Big Search, how it developed, why it's connected to the Super Bowl. And I can't tell that story without Brad, because he's the origin story. He's the guy that's been in the lead seat for 12 years. And so, Brad, when we first met, it was in Miami. This year's Super Bowl is in Miami, first time since we were there. And so in the middle of going to Miami, you had already put a year in doing the Big Search. What was your thought process when that was all first starting? Why the Super Bowl and why the format you took in going in to do this outreach?
Yeah, I mean, it was the Super Bowl because just earlier in that year, there was a big bust of a pimp and several underage girls that had been brought into Phoenix, Arizona for the college football series. And, we made a comment to myself, along with Anna Rodriguez and her family, Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking. We were sitting around a table talking about how can we make a difference. And we kind of came up with this idea. We wanted to engage the church. We wanted to empower the church. We wanted to take the church out there. And so Class Kids Foundation, Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking started this for the very first time.
Even though we're not all that nostalgic, it's been 10 years. We have a team doing a Big Search in Tampa this year, which is where the very first Big Search happened. And Miami's the Super Bowl. I know there's 1,000 groups in Miami doing their version of the Big Search this week as well. And so I just want to ask you a couple questions. You gave a little bit of the history of that. Started with you, with Class Kids and Florida Coalition Against Human Trafficking. What are some key things throughout the years as you did that first one, then that second one where we met, where you thought, hey, there's something here? Where did you recognize that? Where did you see that?
Oh, wow. I would probably say the first time that I really saw that this thing that we were doing could really catch on and catch momentum was probably in Indianapolis. I think we've always had good partnership within the church. We've had good partnership with social services as well as law enforcement, but it kind of comes pieces and parcel. I think when we hit Indianapolis for the first time, we had all those entities together. And we really saw a lot of momentum out of that effort. And every year from then, it has absolutely skyrocketed and grown. And now it's kind of funny, right? You just mentioned it. There's 1,000 organizations in Miami that really kind of started back 11 years ago when there was no organizations going in there. Yeah. So you can see where that momentum has grown.
So I remember Indianapolis. I was fond of that. We were from that state government. Everybody jumped in, was highlighting that issue of human trafficking. There was, well, that's like the third year I was there, fourth year for you. What are some other kind of moments? So let me do it this way. What, in a nutshell, is the Big Search? What comprises the Big Search that's really taken off steam over the years?
Yeah, to me, what comprises the Big Search is bringing all of those same entities that we just talked about, right? You bring the community and you engage the community, you engage law enforcement, social services, the church, all of those entities that make up a community, but you galvanize them around one topic. And that topic for us is missing children. And so we galvanize them around that topic called missing children, and then we take that opportunity to educate the public about missing children and this other issue called human trafficking. And that's really what the Big Search is about. Let's go find missing children, and let's educate the public about missing children and the nexus called human trafficking.
Yeah, and I that was the thing that compelled me, having been overseas and doing work in Southern Asia with trafficking. And having even though I had a pretty good understanding of human trafficking, to make that connection between missing kids and what was going on with human trafficking, you're the first guy to make that connection for me. I know Class Kids was the first organization to make that connection to really a lot of these groups that are even Miami this week. Like a light bulb went on. Where did you make the connection between the missing child and the connection with the direct connection with some of these missing kids and human trafficking?
I mean, I think first, the nexus for the big search and the concept behind that literally stemmed from the Search for Polly class, which is our namesake. For that, what I started with is for Polly, it was a huge community search where we really brought all of these assets together, and it became a value-added asset for law enforcement in the search for a missing child. But what really kind of brought that nexus together for me for missing children and human trafficking was my very first case. It was a case in Florida, in Pensacola, of a young 14-year-old that went missing. Looked like it was going to be an Amber Alert. Right, they were going to issue that. She was seen forced into a vehicle after her mother had been struck down. So they called me out, and we are running a big search. And the investigator and I are basically beating through all of the little girl's stuff in her bedroom, and we come across some clues that lead us to believe that she wasn't taken by some complete stranger, that she was taken by some predator, and this predator had her at our local motel. And turns out that she had been sold into human trafficking by a pimp, and that was my very first missing child case that I knew of that resulted in a human trafficking case, and that changed everything for us.
The dynamic, we've received a whole lot of training from Brad over the years, continue to learn from you. Not every missing child is being trafficked, but for sure every missing child is vulnerable. You know, when we do these big searches, I know the communication in the city, or here's some of the things that could be happening, but we resist the idea that when we push out the kids' faces like they are in this book, this is a resource you created. Miami's going to be seeing a lot of resources similar to this in the hotels even this year, that the kids you're looking at in here aren't necessarily trafficked, but for certain there are all sorts of vulnerability involved with them being on the street. And so that's what impacted me. And I know over the years, as we looked at the Super Bowl as a context to do this, for me it was very opportunistic, not a fundraising opportunity, but like what you said, seemed like in the Super Bowl city, everyone was available to work together. Everyone was talking to each other. People wanted to get involved. The Super Bowl is its own orbit. So when you want to do an outreach, the Super Bowl by itself generates people interested in the outreach. And then this issue of human trafficking. So over the years, I've just seen this grow, and it's been a thrill to be a part of it. At what point in our conversations did we start to move away from the Super Bowl? You remember that? And why did we move away from going to the Super Bowl city during the Super Bowl week?
Yeah. You know, I mean, in the very beginning, it was about the sporting event, and it was about the large event. I make no bones about that. It started because of an arrest in Phoenix centered around the college football series. But obviously, we work this issue 365 days of the year. We work this all over the country, so we know how prolific the problem becomes. So we quickly started to move away from the concept that this idea that we have centered around the Super Bowl, it could also take root in other cities and other states that didn't have to actually have it centered around anything. It could just be centered around the synergy that you can form within a community around a topic that is as strong as missing children.
Yeah, and we've seen that. And I think this is our 4th year doing the big search in Las Vegas. Every year around the Super Bowl time, Vegas actually gets more visitors for the 10 days into the Super Bowl than the Super Bowl city does. And I don't do that as a competition. It's just Vegas, we got almost 50 million visitors a year that come to Vegas. We get 1.2, 1.3 million visitors on average every 10 days here. A lot of money flowing in. Vegas has its own reputation. So it's been a joy to me since we're planted here. That's what I always loved about the big search is personally is what can be left up behind from that city that empowers those groups that have to do this 365 in that city to be better at what they do, to have stronger partnerships and relationships. And I can't thank you enough for helping free with that. This week, how many people do we have here in Vegas this week working with us from outside, and then also the volunteers from Vegas?
Yeah, I mean, just from outside of Vegas, I mean, goodness, you're probably talking close to 100 people, counting all of the missionaries that came in from outside the area, all of the specialized assets that we brought in. So yeah, well over 100 people just doing that process alone. And then not to mention the hundreds of citizen volunteers, community volunteers, and just tonight, I mean, we saw well over 100 cops and that coming out here and just hitting this strip. To me, I never dreamed that this is what this search effort could look like until you come here and see this.
Yeah, and we added Brad to the free team. He is our national search director now, still executive director with Class Kids among 400 other hats that you have. But the Big Search, I'm a believer in it. You guys know, a lot of you guys have been following free for the whole decade we've been working at the Super Bowl. And so we have lots of big searches lined up in the future. Brad's sitting in that lead seat. We're discussing what are the different cities we've talked about already that are lining up to do the big search.
Yeah, man. So like you said, Tampa kicked off just today. So they started their version of that big search. We'll be back in there over the summer to really reinvest in that community. We're talking about Sacramento now. We've talked about Nashville. I know that I have a couple of cities on the plate close to where I'm from, Pensacola, Florida. So we have a couple of cities over there that are wanting to look at this. We've been in Kansas City doing this as well. So yeah, I think it can come to a city near you if you want this. But I will tell you that once you do it, it will change your life. It will change your city's life. You see, this problem is not something that may happen, it's already happening. I can't even tell you that it's not something that will happen at some future date and you need to prepare for it. It's happening right now. We average 2,300 children that go missing every single day in the United States, and every single one of them have needs, which produces vulnerabilities. And if they're vulnerable, then someone out there wants to exploit them. It is our job and our responsibility to take care of those children.
100%, and that's a great place for us to end. There are so many details of the last decade, stories that will be told about big searches, reunions of people you searched for long ago that became searchers at the big search, and we're going to tell that in written form. But we wanted to give just a little update from Vegas, why we're in Vegas now. We are seeing incredible things every year we do this, building stronger partnerships, building stronger relationships right here in this city. And then we got over 10 cities lining up that want to do a big search. Strikeout Slavery has been highlighting the big search at the Major League ballparks all around the country. If you guys want to be a part of it, obviously you can come to Vegas anytime, work with us. Brad's our point on that. He's the godfather of all that you're seeing, even in where are we at? Miami this year. Now he doesn't want any credit for a lot of what's going on in Miami maybe this year, but it all originated in Tampa Bay back in 2009. And thank you, Brad, for being faithful to giving this gift out so that cities can be impacted, young kids can be found. Hundreds have been found over the decade because people are willing to lay their time down to look for them. So thank you, Brad, for that. That's all I got. Anything you want to end with?
No, it's just a beautiful city. It's a beautiful town. We would ask each one of you to seriously consider bringing the big search, this effort to find missing children, to find missing drunks, to find whatever is needed. If we can do it there. Well, that just totally blew me away.